We're done here, Nolan. Dexter's voice sliced through the hum of the data center at 11:15 on a Wednesday night, 3 days before our nationwide payment migration was supposed to go live. 12 years of my life, dismissed like a Tim Hortons receipt blowing across a parking lot. I'm Nolan Firth, 49 years old, former combat engineer with the Canadian Forces turned lead infrastructure architect at Ridgepoint Financial Systems in downtown Toronto. That title sounds impressive until you realize it means I'm the guy who gets called at 2 a.m. when the payment rails crash and nobody else knows which cable goes where. I've kept this company's heart beating through 2 CEO changes, the 2020 pandemic meltdown, and more clueless VPs than I've got gray hairs on my head. And trust me, I've got plenty. Dexter Hollings stood in the doorway of the server room wearing a cashmere overcoat like he'd just come from some Bay Street cocktail party. The guy smelled like sandalwood and entitlement. He'd been VP of technology for exactly 9 months, brought in from some venture capital firm where his biggest technical achievement was updating his LinkedIn profile to say, digital transformation leader. He was checking his phone while firing me. Couldn't even give me the dignity of eye contact. Effective immediately, he continued, scrolling through what I assumed was a reservation confirmation at Canoe. Severance is 2 weeks. Standard package. HR will send the paperwork to your personal email. My mortgage payment hit me like a gut punch. $3,200 a month for a semi-detached in Scarborough that was worth half what I paid for it before the market corrected. My daughter's first year at Western starting in September. Residence fees alone were going to eat my RRSP. The health benefits I'd lose, the dental coverage my ex-wife still depended on through our separation agreement. You're letting me go, I said, tasting something metallic in my mouth 72 hours before the Maple Bridge migration launches. The single largest payment processing overhaul in the company's history. Because why? Dexter straightened his collar. Cultural alignment, Nolan. You're a bottleneck. You triple verify everything. Insist on manual failover testing. Refuse to adopt modern deployment pipelines. My nephew Ashton says your security protocols add 14 unnecessary steps to every release cycle. Ashton Hollings, 23 years old. 6-month certificate from some online full-stack accelerator program that probably advertised on Instagram between protein powder and crypto scams. The kid who asked me 2 weeks ago if a load balancer was something you use at the gym. He'd been shadowing me for a month, supposedly learning the architecture. What he'd actually been doing was complaining to his uncle that I made things too complicated. 14 unnecessary steps, I repeated. Dexter, those steps are the reason that every single transaction processed through our system, every e-transfer, every mortgage payment, every RRSP contribution from Halifax to Victoria, arrives at the right account instead of vanishing into the digital void. You want to remove those steps, you might as well leave the vault door open and put up a welcome sign. He held up his hand. Manicured, I noticed. Like some Bay Street banker who'd never touched a keyboard with intent. Ashton moves fast. He thinks in systems. He's already redesigned the deployment pipeline to cut release time by 60%. He removed the validation checksums, Dexter. That's not speed. That's recklessness. Mitch will walk you out. He gestured behind me where Mitch Kerrigan, our night security guard, stood in the doorway looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Mitch is a good man. Ukrainian immigrant, works nights so his wife can do her nursing shifts during the day. I bring him a double-double every Friday. He knows my daughter's name, asks about her volleyball tournaments. Now he had to escort me out like I'd been caught stealing office supplies. I need to document the migration checkpoints, I said, reaching for my keyboard. My monitors showed the deployment console, the interface I'd built from scratch to manage Maple Bridge, our nationwide payment processing migration. The cursor blinked at the end of a command sequence I'd been running for 6 hours, a staging verification that was currently 72% complete. Step away from the workstation, Dexter said, his voice getting that corporate steel edge that middle managers practice in the mirror. Ashton starts his shift at 7. He'll manage the remaining verification. The absurdity of it washed over me like ice water from Lake Ontario in February. Ashton. The kid who thought API stood for App Performance Index, who tried to SSH into a production server using his Netflix password, who once asked me why we couldn't just copy-paste the database to make a backup. He completed an accelerated certification, Nolan. He's Agile certified and DevOps ready. I grabbed my keys from the desk. My Honda Civic fob, 12 years old, bought used after the separation when my ex got the SUV. Next to it was my worn Field Notes notebook, every page filled with system diagrams, emergency procedures, and 3 years of warnings that nobody wanted to hear. You're making a catastrophic mistake, Dexter. This isn't swapping a barista at a coffee shop. This is brain surgery, and you just handed the scalpel to someone who thinks an MRI is a type of craft beer. Innovation waits for no one, Nolan. The future belongs to those who move fast. I looked at my screens one last time. 3 monitors showing the guts of Maple Bridge, a payment processing architecture that handled $4.2 billion in daily transactions across every major Canadian bank, credit union, and fintech platform. Interac e-transfers, payroll processing for 200,000 businesses, pension fund distributions for retirees from Corner Brook to Tofino. The staging verification was still running. 72% complete. I could see the validation queue processing, each entry representing a test transaction verified against our reconciliation engine. 28% remained. Without that verification completing successfully, the migration would launch against unvalidated routing tables, like flying a 747 without checking if the runway exists. I didn't stop the verification. I didn't kill the process. But I also didn't save the session state. If anyone closed that terminal window, or, say, shoved it aside to make room for a MacBook covered in Tech Bro stickers, the verification would terminate, and the partial results would vanish from system memory, like smoke in a winter wind. You sure about this, Dexter? Completely. Now please, Mitch is waiting. Nobody else was on the floor to witness it. But in Dexter's mind, he was already rehearsing this for the board. How he'd streamlined the department, brought in fresh blood, eliminated the old guard who couldn't keep up with the pace of innovation. I walked toward Mitch. No hard feelings, buddy. Just doing your job. Mitch's face was the color of old paper. I'm really sorry, Nolan. Really. Not your circus, Mitch. Not your monkeys. The elevator down felt like sinking into cold water. Brushed steel walls and the faint smell of the cleaning solution they use every night. Mitch stood in the corner, staring at his shoes. I didn't blame him. Guy was trying to keep his family together on a security guard's salary in Toronto. That's hard enough without having to march out the one person who treated him like a human being. When we reached the lobby, I realized my building access pass was still on my desk. The same pass I needed to get my car out of the underground parking at King and Bay. Mitch, I need my pass, unless you want me sleeping in the lobby until morning. He looked panicked, like I'd asked him to solve a differential equation. I'll go grab it. Stay here. I'll come with you, I said. Left it right next to my thermos. We went back up. When the elevator opened on the 19th floor, the world had changed. Music, not the quiet hum of servers and fluorescent lights I left behind 5 minutes ago. Electronic dance music. The kind that sounds like a robot having a panic attack, pulsing from Bluetooth speakers that had no business being within 50 meters of production infrastructure. And there, sitting in my ergonomic chair at my workstation, was Ashton Hollings. He looked like he'd been ordered from a catalog titled Silicon Valley Starter Kit. Fitted hoodie, wireless earbuds, sneakers that cost more than my monthly car payment. He'd pushed my triple monitor setup to the side to make room for his MacBook Pro, which was covered in stickers, Move Fast, Disrupt or Die, 10X and Jenner. A half-empty can of some energy drink sat dangerously close to exposed network cables. What stopped my breathing wasn't the stickers or the energy drink. It was my main screen. The staging verification I'd let running was gone. Terminal closed. In its place was a graphical dashboard I'd never seen before. Some third-party monitoring tool with a slick, dark theme and animated charts that looked pretty but told you absolutely nothing useful. And in the bottom right corner, pulsing like a warning light on a nuclear reactor, reconciliation, in Johnny, manual override, HFR. Oh, sick, are you knowing? Ashton spun around in my chair with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever who just discovered a tennis ball. Uncle Dex said you were leaving. Bummer, man. But hey, out with the old, right? He actually finger-gunned me. Finger guns. While sitting on a digital powder keg. I stared at that red warning indicator. Ashton, I said, my voice so calm it scared even me. What did you do to the reconciliation engine? He grinned like I'd asked him about his gaming setup. Oh, dude, that thing was throwing up these super annoying error dialogues every time I tried to push my deployment scripts. Something about integrity validation pending and checksums incomplete. Total buzzkill. So I just toggled off the pre-flight checks. Look how fast the deployment pipeline runs now. He pointed at a progress bar that was racing across the screen. It was like watching a car speedometer climb while knowing the brakes had been cut. That's not speed, I said, gripping my access card so hard the edges dug white lines into my palm. That's a memory corruption cascade. You're pushing unvalidated routing tables into the live staging environment. Every test transaction is writing to production-adjacent memory without reconciliation checks. Bro, you're being super negative. Ashton rolled his eyes with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong because they'd never done anything consequential. Uncle Dex said you were a total pessimist. I'm just streamlining the UX for launch day. Think of it like defragging a hard drive. You're not defragging anything. You're feeding a wood chipper with the company's entire transaction history. Mitch touched my arm. Nolan, we need to go. I'll get your pass. I looked at Ashton, already back to typing with one hand while scrolling TikTok with the other. He had no idea. He was sitting in front of a system that processed every e-transfer, every payroll deposit, every pension check in the country, and he just ripped out the safety systems because they were harsh on his vibe. I did the calculation, the kind of math they don't teach in 6-month online certificates. Without reconciliation checks, the routing tables would start writing corrupted entries within 12 minutes. The staging environment would bleed into production buffers. Transaction routing would scramble. Money meant for a grandmother's pension in Saskatoon could end up in a corporate holding account in Montreal. Mortgage payments would vanish. Payroll deposits would duplicate or disappear. The Big Five banks would start getting reconciliation failures at 6 a.m. when their overnight batch processing kicked in. $340,000 per minute in transaction liability exposure. Regulatory fines from OSFI that would make the Nortel scandal look like a parking ticket. And somewhere in a hospital in Winnipeg, a cancer patient's insurance claim payment would bounce because the routing table sent it to the wrong clearinghouse. But hey, at least the dashboard had cool animations. I turned around without another word. No point explaining thermodynamics to a house cat. Back in the elevator, Mitch stood silently while I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact for Archie McLeod, the CEO, the man who'd founded Ridgepoint in his garage in Kitchener 30 years ago with a fax machine and a dream about making Canadian banking faster. Archie wasn't a coder. He was a banker, old school, the kind of guy who understood that moving money from one account to another required precision, not personality. 11:26 p.m. The system would start its death spiral in exactly 12 minutes. I typed with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years making sure every keystroke counted. System integrity fails in 12 minutes. Reconciliation engine disabled. Every overnight bank settlement in the country at risk. Good luck with the fresh thinking. Hit send. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then Archie's reply, "Don't you dare leave that building." I stopped dead in the middle of the marble lobby. The revolving door was right there. Bay Street, the cold November air, the 24-hour Shoppers Drug Mart where I could buy a bottle of Canadian Club and call it a night. File for EI in the morning. Start the slow, humiliating process of job hunting at 49, in a market that thinks anyone over 35 is a dinosaur. My phone buzzed again. I'm 8 minutes out. Wait for me. Mitch, I said, setting my box down on the lobby bench. Not Italian leather here, just standard issue corporate furniture. I think I'm going to sit tight for a few minutes. Technically, you're trespassing, Nolan. Technically, Mitch, I'm the only person in this postal code who understands what's about to happen. And in about 10 minutes, Dexter's going to learn why legacy systems is just another word for the stuff that actually works. It started the way disasters always start. Quietly. A flicker on the massive display behind the reception desk, the one showing Ridgepoint's real-time transaction map of Canada. Usually it was a beautiful constellation of green dots, every dot a successful transaction, connecting Vancouver to St. John's in a web of digital trust. At 11:34 p.m., those green dots started turning amber. Jamie Lynn, the night receptionist, frowned at her screen. That's weird. My Outlook just crashed. I knew exactly why. Our Exchange server shared back-end infrastructure with the transaction processing cluster. a cost-cutting measure I'd flagged in a memo 18 months ago. Dexter had called the memo infrastructure anxiety and filed it somewhere between the recycling bin and oblivion. At 11:35, the phone started screaming. Not ringing, howling. Every line on the switchboard lit up simultaneously, and through the handsets came nothing but static and garbled noise, like digital voices drowning in corrupted data packets. Then the stairwell door slammed open, and Tessa Okafor, our junior systems analyst, brilliant kid, anxiety disorder, she managed with breathing exercises and sheer willpower, came sprinting down from the 19th floor like the building was on fire. Her glasses were crooked and she was clutching her laptop like a life preserver. "Mitch!" She was gasping. "Is Nolan still here? Please, God, tell me Nolan is still here." Mitch pointed at me. Tessa ran over, her face a shade I'd never seen on a living person. "Nolan, it's gone. Everything's gone." Ashton disabled the reconciliation engine and pushed his deployment scripts to the staging cluster, and now the routing tables are corrupted, and the overnight settlement queue is rejecting every single batch, and the backup sync is throwing authentication errors, and I don't know what to do, and I think I'm going to throw up. "Sounds like a validation cascade failure," I said, examining my fingernails. "Did someone happen to disable the pre-flight integrity checks to make the dashboards load faster?" Tessa looked like she might actually cry. She said they were creating unnecessary friction in the deployment pipeline. Imagine that. "You have to come back, Nolan. Please." Dexter's screaming at the help desk. Ashton's in the server room trying to reboot things by literally unplugging servers and plugging them back in, like it's a Wi-Fi router at his mom's house. The Bank of Montreal's overnight operations team just called asking why their settlement files are coming back as corrupted. If we're still down when TD and RBC start their morning batch processing at 5 a.m., we lose roughly $340,000 a minute in transaction exposure. I finished for her. Plus regulatory liability, plus OSFI investigation, plus breach of our processing agreements with every major financial institution in the country. Rough night for Dexter's performance review. "Please, Nolan, I'll do anything. I can't fix this alone. I can't help you, Tessa. I was terminated for being a bottleneck. I'm officially a security risk. Mitch, am I authorized to access company systems?" Mitch shook his head so hard I thought his neck might snap. "Strict orders. Immediate escort off premises." "There it is," I shrugged. "My hands are tied, and I'm pretty sure my severance package didn't include 24/7 emergency technical support." That's when the revolving door spun with the force of a man who'd built an empire by refusing to let anything stand between him and a solution. Archie McClade walked in wearing a Roots sweatshirt and jeans, his silver hair uncombed, holding his phone like it contained the nuclear codes. He'd clearly driven here from his home in Oakville at speeds that would have had the OPP writing tickets. He ignored the screaming switchboard, ignored Tessa hyperventilating, ignored Jamie frantically restarting her computer. He walked straight to me with the focused intensity of a man who'd spent 30 years building something and wasn't about to watch it burn. "You saw this coming," he said. His voice was gravel and granite. "I predicted it," I corrected, standing up from the bench. "There's a difference between prophecy and 12 years of reading system logs that everyone else treats like wallpaper." "How bad?" "Catastrophic. Your nephew-in-law just poured maple syrup into a jet engine and wondered why it stopped flying." Archie rubbed his face with both hands, and for a moment he looked every one of his 61 years. "Can you fix it?" I picked up my cardboard box. "That depends, Archie. Are we talking about fixing the servers, or fixing the management virus that infected them?" The virus? The virus named Dexter Hollings. The malware named nepotism hiring. The security breach called moving fast and breaking things when you're handling the financial transactions of 38 million Canadians. The lobby went silent except for the distant wailing of phones and the hum of the emergency lighting that had kicked in when the main system started failing. Even Jamie had given up trying to answer calls that were nothing but digital white noise. "Walk with me," Archie said. The executive elevator was a different world, smooth as silk, real maple paneling, and it smelled like cedar instead of industrial cleaner. Archie leaned against the back wall watching the 4 numbers climb. "Dexter told me you were resistant to modernization," he said as we passed the 10th floor. Called you a legacy liability. Said your methods were holding back the team's velocity. Dexter thinks velocity means removing the seatbelts from a school bus because they slow down boarding time. I pulled out my field notes notebook, coffee-stained, dog-eared, held together with an elastic band, filled with 3 years of warnings nobody wanted to hear. I'm not resistant, Archie. I'm the only person in this building who reads the documentation before pressing buttons. The elevator opened onto the executive floor, and it was pandemonium. People running down hallways with laptops. Someone's printer spewing blank pages in an endless loop. Through the glass walls of the IT operations center, I could see screens filled with nothing but red error messages. A digital crime scene. Archie led me to his corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the CN Tower and the frozen expanse of Lake Ontario. A desk made from reclaimed barnwood that probably cost more than my car. And walls lined with framed photos of Ridgepoint's journey from a Kitchener garage to a Bay Street tower. He shut the door, cutting off the chaos. "What do you know that they don't?" he asked. "Everything that actually works." I dropped my notebook on his desk with a thud that echoed off the windows, the sound of competence landing on expensive wood. "What is this?" "Maple Bridge Risk Assessment. Complete failure scenarios with mitigation protocols." I tried to present this to Dexter 3 weeks ago. He said the meeting slot would be better used for a brainstorm session on reimagining the deployment experience through a lens of radical simplicity. Archie opened the notebook, scanning my handwritten analysis. A mess of diagrams, flowcharts, and margin notes that only made sense if you'd spent a decade inside the system. "Page 14, I said. "Section titled, Reconciliation Engine Bypass Scenarios." He found it, read for 30 seconds, then looked up at me with an expression I'd only seen on people watching their house burn down. "You predicted exactly what just happened. I predicted that giving administrative access to an unqualified person in a critical financial system would result in them disabling safety protocols because error messages hurt their feelings." Ashton was just the specific flavor of incompetence. Could have been anyone with a 6-month certificate and unlimited confidence. He closed the notebook and set it down carefully. "The system's completely dark, Nolan. The transaction processing dashboard is dead. RBC's overnight operations center has already escalated to their CTO. TD's settlement team is calling every 6 minutes. We've got pension fund distributions queued for 200,000 retirees across the country that process at 5 a.m. Government benefit payments, EI checks, CPP deposits, child benefit payments for single mothers. All of it routes through our reconciliation engine." "I know," I said, leaning against his window frame and looking out at the city lights. "I designed those routing systems. Pension payments start processing in 5 hours. If those transactions hit corrupted routing tables, retirees in Moncton don't get their checks. Disability payments bounce. Mortgage auto-withdrawals from accounts that show zero balances because the real balance is sitting in a corrupted buffer somewhere. You're looking at a financial crisis that'll make the Phoenix pay system disaster look like a rounding error." Archie walked to the window beside me. His reflection looked like a man watching his life's work dissolve. Dexter showed me Ashton's credentials. Portfolio of projects. Called him a cloud-native infrastructure specialist. He showed you a Coursera completion certificate and a GitHub profile full of tutorial projects he followed step by step. The same programs that'll teach you to build Netflix in a weekend, and then you couldn't deploy a grocery list app without Stack Overflow holding your hand. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to gloat. This wasn't about being right. This was about 38 million Canadians who trusted that when they pressed send on an e-transfer, the money would actually arrive. Archie, you built this company by understanding that trust is the only currency that matters in financial services. You know that if you put diesel in a gasoline engine, it dies. You just let Dexter pour sugar in the gas tank because the person pouring shared his last name. His reflection in the window aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Fix it. No, I'll double your salary. No. Name your price, stock options, title, whatever you want. I turned to face him directly. Archie, you still don't understand. This isn't about compensation. This is about respect. You let them humiliate me. You let them walk me out of my own operations center like a criminal because I was too slow to appreciate the beauty of deleting safety systems. You handed a loaded weapon to a child because he was family. What do you want? I want the weapon back. And I want the people who armed the child to face consequences. You want me to terminate Dexter and Ashton? I want them gone, tonight, before I touch a single line of code. With full acknowledgement that what happened tonight was the direct result of nepotism overriding competence. Dexter's been with me for 9 months, but he's got a contract. They're illegal. Then start calling your lawyers. I cut him off, because in 4 hours and 47 minutes, 200,000 retirees are going to wake up to empty bank accounts. Child benefit payments for single parents across 3 provinces won't deposit. And when the Financial Post runs the story tomorrow, every single headline is going to ask the same question: who was in charge when Canada's payment infrastructure went dark? Archie's phone was vibrating constantly. Notifications, calls, board members jolted awake by automated alerts. The weight of it pressed lines into his face that hadn't been there when he walked in. "Okay," he said quietly. "I didn't hear you." "Okay, AA." He said it loud enough to rattle the windows. "You win. Fix the system. I'll handle Dexter and Ashton." I picked up my notebook, tucking it under my arm. "Get me root access to everything. And get me a coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a gym sock. Tim Hortons dark roast. Black. No sugar. I've got a long night ahead." Archie grabbed his desk phone, the landline, the one communication system still functioning because it ran on copper lines. I'd insisted on maintaining when Dexter wanted to go fully VoIP and barked an order that could be heard through the walls. Security override. Executive authorization. Restore full system credentials for user and Firth admin. Authorization code Delta, November 7. Do it now. He set the phone down and looked at me like he'd made a deal he wasn't sure he'd survive. "You're live." "Not yet," I said. "I need the operations center. And I need it empty. I don't work with an audience, especially an audience that thinks rebooting a server by yanking the power cord is an acceptable recovery procedure." We walked down the corridor where emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly amber glow. Through the glass walls of the operations center, I could see the aftermath. Dexter was pacing like a cornered animal, red-faced, shouting into a dead phone. Ashton sat in the corner surrounded by unplugged Ethernet cables, staring at his laptop screen with the vacant expression of someone who just realized that move fast and break things has consequences when the things you break belong to 38 million people. The rest of my team, Tessa, Ravi Banerjee, Ingrid Holm, stood around their workstations looking like survivors of something they'd never been trained for. Archie pushed open the heavy doors. The server room's air conditioning hit us like walking into a January cold snap in Winnipeg. The servers were running hot, fans screaming, processors cycling through corrupted data in infinite loops. "Dexter." Archie's voice echoed off the server racks. Dexter spun around, relief flooding his face when he saw the CEO. It curdled into something else entirely when he spotted me behind him. "Archie, thank God. We've been hit by a sophisticated cyber attack. This is all the hallmarks of a state-sponsored intrusion. Possibly North Korean." "And what is he doing here?" "I had security escort him out 2 hours ago." "He's here because you're an incompetent disaster, Dexter," Archie said, his voice so quiet it was more terrifying than any shout. "And this wasn't a cyber attack. This was your nephew playing with systems he doesn't understand because you gave him the keys to the kingdom and told him the instruction manual was optional." The operations center went silent except for the whir of cooling fans fighting a losing battle against overheating processors. "Excuse me?" Dexter sputtered, his corporate composure cracking like ice on a spring pond. "You're relieved. Both of you. Get out." "Archie, you can't be serious. This is a crisis situation. We need experienced leadership. We need a surgeon." Archie cut him off. "You two are the infection. Get out before I call security." Ashton looked up from his corner, Ethernet cables draped around his neck like some terrible tech bro fashion accessory. "But Uncle Dex said I was revolutionizing the deployment paradigm." "Kid," I said, stepping forward, "if you touch one more piece of equipment in this building, I will personally ensure that the only system you ever administer again is the self-checkout at a no-frills." Dexter saw the notebook under my arm, saw the look in Archie's eyes, and finally understood that his 9 months of corporate buzzwords and innovation theater had reached their expiry date. This was the engine room of a financial institution that held the trust of an entire nation, and he was just a passenger who'd been pretending to be the captain. You'll hear from my lawyer, Dexter said, pulling Ashton toward the door, and to hear from OSFI when they investigate how you gave administrative access to critical financial infrastructure based on a family relationship instead of qualifications, Archie replied. Now get out of my building. They left. Ashton paused at the door to grab his energy drink. Priorities. I looked at my team. Tessa, Ravi, Ingrid, exhausted, shaken but still standing. Good people who'd been forced to watch incompetence destroy months of their careful work. All right, show's over, I announced, rolling up my sleeves. Tessa, get me a direct terminal connection to the core reconciliation cluster. Ravi, kill all external API connections. We're going dark for exactly 3 minutes. Every bank, every payment processor, every automated settlement queue goes silent. Ingrid, start mirroring the transaction logs to our disaster recovery environment. Raw dump only. Don't try to parse or validate anything yet. Going dark means every pending e-transfer in the country fails, Tessa said, her voice shaking. They've already failed, I replied, sitting down at the main console that Ashton had turned into his personal disaster zone. I pulled a disinfectant wipe from my pocket and cleaned the keyboard. 12 years of habit. Right now we're just stopping the bleeding before the patient loses more blood. Archie, I said without turning around, you might want to step back. I'm about to violate roughly 12 Ridgepoint IT governance policies to bypass the security locks your nephew-in-law created. Just fix it, he said. I cracked my knuckles and took a deep breath. The main screen was a museum of failure, red text cascading down like a digital waterfall of everything that could go wrong in financial infrastructure. Ashton had somehow forced our distributed transaction processing architecture into a single-node bottleneck. It was like trying to funnel Niagara Falls through a coffee stir stick. Listen up, I commanded. We're performing emergency surgery on a patient that's technically flatlined. Tessa, transaction log mirror. Raw dump, no validation. Just get everything copied before we lose it. Copying now, Tessa confirmed, her fingers flying. Ravi, manually send maintenance flags to every bank settlement queue in the country. Tell them we're performing scheduled infrastructure maintenance. It's a complete lie, but it buys us 15 minutes before their automated escalation protocols trigger, and this becomes a national news story. Maintenance flag sent, Robbie said. Robbie said system already acknowledged. TD, acknowledged. BMO, acknowledged. I turned to the core reconciliation cluster. It was thrashing. Writing and rewriting corrupted routing entries in an endless loop, like a dog chasing its own tail at 1,000 transactions per second. Sometimes you have to kill the patient to save them. Opening root terminal, I announced. The black screen with the green cursor appeared, the oldest, truest interface in computing. My fingers typed the command that would either save the company or finish destroying it. Sudo systemctl, stop Ridgepoint core, force. No block, you're killing the master process, Ravi gasped. Every transaction in the pipeline is already corrupted, I finished. We're not losing good data. We're stopping bad data from spreading. Think of it as a tourniquet. I hit enter. Every screen in the room went dark. The server fan spun down to a whisper. The operations center fell into a silence so complete I could hear Tessa's breathing exercises. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Did we just delete everything? Tessa whispered. Wait for it, I said. Come on, you magnificent piece of engineering. I built you tougher than this. Then, like sunrise breaking over the Rockies, a single line of green text appeared on the main monitor. System recovery initiated. In a dreadedy check in progress. Failsafe free protocol detected. Ninfirst first press. Failsafe protocolina betra parano backup vd 7.3. What is that? Archie asked, stepping closer. That, I said, pointing at the screen, is the so-called bottleneck that Dexter wanted to eliminate. It's a complete ghost image of our entire transaction database and routing architecture that I've been generating every 4 hours for the past 3 years. Slow to create, invisible to anyone who doesn't know exactly where to look, and completely immutable. Ashton couldn't delete what he never knew existed. Green text began cascading down the screens, restoring routing tables. 23%, 51%, re-5 1%, 78%, reconciliation and green wielding, 34%, 67%, 91%. Transaction log integrity. Fiverr verified. Tessa, prepare to reopen external connections on my mark, I commanded. When this restoration completes, we're going to get hit with a tsunami of queued transactions from every bank in the country. The system needs to be ready. Ready, Tessa confirmed, her voice stronger now. Restore complete. All systems nominal. Mark. Tessa hit her key sequence. Every screen in the room blazed back to life. The transaction map of Canada flickered back online, green dots connecting every province and territory, from Whitehorse to Charlottetown. The pending transaction queue spiked vertically as the system processed hours of backlogged settlements in seconds, then leveled off into normal operating parameters. The collective exhale from my team was louder than the server fans. We're stable, Ravi announced, his voice cracking with relief. All systems green. Transaction throughput is actually higher than pre-incident baseline. Because I flushed 3 years of accumulated index fragmentation during the restart, I explain, sometimes the only way to clean a system is to shut it down and let it rebuild properly. I spun my chair to face Archie, who was staring at the restored displays like he'd just watched a resurrection. Systems fixed, I said. Your banks are getting their settlement files. Pension payments will process on schedule. Retirees in New Brunswick will get their CPP deposits. Single parents in Alberta will get their child benefits. And your board won't be reading about Ridgepoint's catastrophic failure in the Globe and Mail over their morning coffee. The emergency board meeting at 7 a.m. was exactly what you'd expect. Gray suits, nervous energy, and the particular flavor of corporate contrition that happens when disaster gets averted at the last possible second. Archie sat at the head of the boardroom table, and I sat at his right hand. I wasn't wearing a suit, just my work clothes, my field notes notebook, and the quiet satisfaction of a man who just prevented a national financial crisis with 3 years of paranoid backups and 12 years of institutional knowledge. The crisis has been fully resolved, Archie announced, thanks to the expertise of our new Chief Technology Officer Nolan Firth. Every head turned toward me. They didn't see a middle-aged divorced guy from Scarborough with coffee stains on his flannel. They saw the man who held the keys to their digital kingdom. The only person in the room who understood not just how the system worked, but why it worked. And what happened when you let someone who didn't understand either of those things anywhere near the controls. Mr. Stade. Firth, the board chair said, adjusting her glasses, can you assure us this won't happen again? As long as I have oversight of all system changes and final authority over personnel decisions affecting critical infrastructure, I replied. Nobody touches core systems without my sign-off. We're going back to a stability-first model, proven engineering, proper testing, documentation that people actually read. No more trendy solutions, no more innovation theater, no more hiring based on last names instead of last commits. They nodded. Proven engineering made money. Trendy solutions, it turned out, cost $340,000 per minute. I walked out of that meeting with a title that commanded respect, compensation that would let me pay off the Scarborough mortgage, and actually help my daughter with Western without bleeding my RRSP dry, and the kind of authority that comes not from a fancy title, but from being the person everyone calls when the world is on fire. But more than any of that, I walked out knowing something Dexter's nepotism could never buy. That competence, patience, and 12 years of doing the unglamorous work of keeping systems running had beaten corporate politics and buzzword bingo. Back in my operations center, my room, my kingdom, I sat in my old chair and pulled up the system dashboard one final time. Everything glowed green. The digital heartbeat of Canadian finance was strong and steady. Pensions were processing. Benefits were depositing. Benefits were processing. Benefits were depositing. E-transfers were flying. Somewhere in Saskatoon, a grandmother was going to wake up and see her CPP deposit exactly where it was supposed to be, because I'd spent 3 years building a backup system that nobody appreciated until the night everything else failed. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the thermos of dark roast I always kept for long nights. This qualified as the longest. I poured a cup, raised it toward the monitors showing 100% system uptime, and took a long, slow sip. Too slow, my ass, I said to the humming servers. Turns out slow and steady doesn't just win the race. It keeps the whole damn country running. Dexter and Ashton learned that the hard way. Some people, that's the only way they ever learn.